Sorry. We evidently have somebody trying to take control of our presentation, so apologize for that. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. My name is Joe Domilovitz. For those who don't know me, I'm the town manager here. Have been for about 5.5 years. Sorry. So I really appreciate everybody taking time out. I know a bunch of us, like me, want to be watching the Celtics game tonight, so it's great that you took time to come here and talk with us tonight. Don't have a big agenda or presentation for you. The goal of tonight's meeting is really to have a little bit of a conversation. We want to take a few minutes and present some information to you.
I'm the Chilkey Line Willis.
Okay. I want to be able to present some information to you. I want to introduce our consultants. There's a lot that's facing the town right now. We know that there are a number of issues that people have been concerned with. We have, you know, a proposed 40B development over in Tobacco Woods. We have the student housing at the seminary being sold. We have, we'll just go forward with the in-person meeting. It is being taped. It's being broadcast on HWCAM, so hopefully we'll be able to share that with you. The good news is you in the room will all be able to see our presentation because nobody can mess with that now. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to just talk to you a little bit about how we got to where we are on some of these issues. So I'd love to, I think we're planning to do more of these types of discussions on some of the other issues, but for tonight, what I want to do is spend a little bit of time and talk a little bit about how we got to where we got to around the 3A, the proposed MBTA 3A zoning, and our proposal, our planning process to do form-based zoning for the downtown. And we're going to let the school department talk a little bit about their process on the elementary school project, because there's some overlap there, and I think there's some misunderstanding about how things transpired. We don't want to really spend a whole lot of time and have really lengthy presentations. We want to present a little bit of information from our point of view, and then spend a little bit of time taking some questions. This is just the beginning of a process. So we won't have time enough tonight to talk about everything that you might be concerned about. We'll probably make presentations here for about 30 or 45 minutes and then take questions from you guys for about 45 minutes or so. Love to try to wrap this up between 8:30 and 9 o'clock and let everybody get back to their lives. The town's going to be having other informational sessions on other topics. The consultants that we'll be introducing here in just a minute will be having lots of public input sessions. They'll be launching a website this week. They'll be putting out an electronic survey. They'll be having public meetings. So there's a whole process that plays into it. They'll describe that in a few minutes. I want to take a quick moment and recognize some of the folks that are here in the room. I was going to mention the people that were on Zoom too, but they're no longer on Zoom. We have Caroline Beaulieu from the Select Board, Superintendent Eric Tracy, Dana Lara from the School Committee, myself, and Patrick Reffett is the Planning Director, and Wendy is our Finance Director. John McGrath is the Chairman of the Finance Advisory Committee. We have Emil Dahlquist and Jonathan Poore and Beth Herr all in the room as members of the Planning Board, as well as Jeff On, who is a new associate member of the Planning Board. And they're all here like us to listen, take information, share perspectives. So I'm going to look at my list of bullets. I tried to write something to be more, professional for you, and I tried 5 times, and I wrote 5 different drafts, and I didn't want to bore you, and I didn't want to get too dense into information, so I've only got a little bit of bullet points here. I think that particularly when we're talking about the 3A zoning, I think it's important for folks to understand this isn't something that the town initiated. It's something the town is trying to figure out how to respond to. We haven't formulated that response yet. By undertaking the process we're taking, we are actually going to miss the state's deadline. We're not saying that we should or have to do this way or that way. We're starting a process so we can figure out what is in there, what can help the town of Hamilton, what is it that we're concerned about, what we want to protect against, and see if we can come to a place where there's enough good that we can pass something that satisfies the state. But we can't say no to the state until we get it before town meeting. And in order to have it before town meeting, we have to have this process to develop what it is that we're putting before town meeting. So nothing's been decided. Nobody's saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. None of those decisions have been made yet. Also with us tonight are the folks from Util. That's Matthew Littell and Zoe Muller in charge of our project for us. So I think I've rambled on enough here. I'm going to turn it over to Zoe and Matthew right now.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to hit. Okay. All right, thank you. My name is Matthew Littell. I'm a principal at Util. I'm joined by Zoe Mueller, associate principal and project manager. Not with us tonight are two critical sort of urban designers from our firm, Carlos Sanz-Cachia and Xiaoran Zhang. And Mark Bobrowski is also assisting. He's helped over 100 communities in Massachusetts develop zoning code, so he's quite literally written the book. Our firm is an approximately 65-person firm in Boston. We do a lot of work in large and small municipalities, both planning, urban design, and also sort of architecture. So we're very happy to be here. We're going to give you a very brief overview of what we're up to, what our assignment is, and how we'd like you to participate. I will say in advance that there will be other opportunities to participate and give your input as we move further along in this kind of inquiry about what it might mean to develop a form-based code for the town center. I'll talk a little bit about the goals. I'll talk a little bit more detail about the timeline and what this process will look like. I will give you a 3 to 4 minute primer on what a form-based code actually is, and we can talk about that at greater length later on, but I think it's an important thing to understand why we're choosing it. And then Zoe will talk a little bit about what really the MBTA community's law is requiring of us, what the sort of technical requirements are, and how it might apply to Hamilton. So the goals for this project really came before this project even existed. These were ideas and objectives to revitalize or vitalize the downtown, coming from previous plans, other work conducted by the HDC. Economic vibrancy was a very important one. It's how to support the businesses that are there, how to promote new ones, and to develop a sort of vibrant, walkable town center. Part of that involves fiscal sustainability. There is an effort in many towns to have more businesses, more people, more opportunities for employment in the town, but also through commercial uses and other kinds of uses to both grow and support the tax base to support basic town services. Another important piece that was identified in the housing production plan, and I think probably experienced by many who live here, is the desire to create more varied types of housing. The demographics are always changing. There are older empty nesters, younger empty nesters. There are young people who might want to both live and work in the town, who may not need the single-family house that is the predominant sort of housing type. So part of what we will explore is what kind of code could promote more varied types of housing that could be more suitable in size and affordability, and promote some walkability in the town center. And finally, our charge is to really guide what we would call context-sensitive development patterns, and that is to look very carefully at what it is about Hamilton downtown that gives it its unique character, its sense of scale, and how can we promote a kind of sensible development that respects that scale and can even perhaps enhance it. Our study area is quite loosely the town center. Just to orient everyone, this is the commuter rail, Bay Street moving up here. As this project evolves, the sort of areas for zoning or other kinds of particular aspects of this plan will get into sort of more detail about what particular areas are affected, but generally speaking, this is sort of the general area that we will be focusing on for the most part. There are what we call two other distinct but extremely related issues. The first is the use of the Winthrop School site. We know that's been part of a lively discussion, and that will factor heavily into how we think about downtown as a whole, what the possible future uses of that site might be, whether it's housing or not. That will be part of the equation that we will want to consider as we move forward. The second piece is the MBTA communities compliance, and so this is what's known as Act 3A. As Joe mentioned, the state is requiring all communities served by rail to create what we call a multifamily zoning district of a certain size. Zoni will speak in more detail about what that involves. But with respect to how we approach this plan, these are two very important factors that we will obviously have to consider as we move along. So we are here in June. We've been working with Patrick and Joe and Emil on a sort of basic site analysis. We are gathering data about the town. We are reviewing some past planning efforts, understanding a little bit what the existing density is, those sorts of things. We will, when we next meet with the public, we anticipate what we call a public visioning workshop sometime in the middle of July, and we will send you details about that as that firms up. But that's the event at which we want to get, we want to solicit sort of ideas about how the public envisions the future of downtown. As we move into September, we will have another kind of big engagement event where we begin to take that vision and translate it into a possible code. What are the elements that we want to control for? What are our objectives in terms of scale, character, and how we might, at a conceptual level, sort of translate those into a form-based code. After that, we will be working on sort of taking that feedback and refining it into a sort of draft code, during which, this is sort of in the late fall here, during which time we will be soliciting feedback on various drafts. And last and certainly not least, the final warrant we expect in March, but at the end of the day, the town will actually vote on the product that we have developed and proposed. So an important reminder that while we encourage all kinds of participation along the way to create the best possible input that we can get, this will, as Joe said, end up in a town vote. The town has assembled an advisory committee for us, which is terrific. It's an informal body of residents who are not really decision makers. They have made themselves available to us as a little bit of a resource and a sounding board, so that we can meet with them with a little bit more frequency as we go along. They can give us a better read of generally what's happening on the ground. And I think another important function for that group is to provide constructive feedback, but also to help promote this process throughout the town and help us to communicate to all of you what's going on and to gather both formal and informal feedback from the residents. Okay, I'm going to give a very brief description of what a form-based code is. The town solicited the RFP with a very specific idea to use a form-based coding technique for downtown as the most appropriate way for development. We think it's the right decision, and we think it's important to give you guys at least a kind of 3-minute working knowledge of what it is. In later iterations, we will be talking in more detail about how it works, but as the name suggests, it's a type of zoning code that concerns itself less with, let's call them abstract metrics and numbers like floor area ratio or units per acre, and is more primarily concerned with the actual form of buildings. And the reason that, one of the advantages of this kind of code is it gives the town more prescriptive control over the shape and the character and the scale of buildings at a sort of finer grain than simply a table of numbers. One of the best ways I can explain how this works is to give you a little snapshot of the work that we've done in Littleton, Massachusetts, which is a similarly sort of suburban, rural, village center kind of town. There we identified sort of appropriate types. In this case, there are a lot of examples of what we call the sort of aggregated house, the big house, little house, back house, barn. It's a very common New England form. It's something that everybody loves, but it was a way for us to imagine the building blocks of future development in forms and shapes and of a scale that was appropriate to this particular context. And so you'll see here what we've imagined is sort of conceiving of the code as consisting of a series of basic forms. There's a series of rule sets about how those aggregate and a kind of visualization of how that might result in a building of a certain size. This idea gets translated into the final code. One of the nice things about form-based codes is that they tend to be represented in images. The intent is that it is easy to understand and to interpret, and is very explicit about what the elements of a building are. So it covers everything from the treatment of dormers to the way that certain buildings connect. In the case of Littleton, we allowed what we called a sort of primary massing that had a maximum size. And then there were various ideas about how you could take that primary massing and sort of aggregate it into a form that would result in a building. And again, this is a way to create a building of a certain size that is broken down into elements that are more consistent with the sort of the context. In Littleton, this is a proposal from a developer that actually resulted from this code. It follows the rule set pretty effectively, so you can see a series of, I think this is a commercial use primarily, but instead of just a regular strip mall, which a regular zoning might have normally allowed or at least not prohibited, what we're getting is something a little bit closer to what the town had imagined, which is a series of buildings that appear to be more of a village, less of a sort of shopping center. Another very important thing about form-based codes is that it generally promotes walkability and the sort of enhancement of the public realm from a sort of pedestrian standpoint. And so you'll notice in this case that a lot of the parking and the auto sort of focused uses are in the back. That's a very typical form-based code sort of rule set. And as a result, what was required was a much more enhanced sort of sidewalk condition that makes this a much more pleasant and sort of more village-like sort of assembly of commercial uses than it normally would under a traditional code. I will hand it to Zoe to talk a little bit about, give you a summary of 3A.
Thanks, Matthew. Sorry for the mask earlier. I'm coming off of being sick and didn't want to get you all sick. So, in any case, I need the clicker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to just give you a very basic overview of what the state is requiring with the MBTA Communities Law so that you can understand how it might interact with the visioning process for the town center. So this is, really just to get you started with this. There's a lot of numbers involved here. It can get very technical, but it's best to start early and repeat it often, and it'll start to sink in. You'll start to get the logic of it. So just as by way of introduction, this is a type of work that we've been doing a lot of recently in all different contexts: Newton, Milton, Belmont, Cohasset, Lincoln, Arlington, Norwell, Watertown, and Winthrop. So we've worked with all of those communities, very different in terms of their context, pattern, density, goals. So I mostly say that to reassure you that we're here to listen to you and adapt to what you want to do in your town center and help you understand how it relates to this law. The second piece that's helpful to as a starting point is to understand that the state has structured this so that it is tailored to or proportional to the different sort of communities that exist within the service area of the MBTA. So what that means is that places that have higher levels of transit service, greater access to downtown Boston, have a greater proportional obligation under the law. So they need to meet higher numbers. So Hamilton falls in the the commuter rail community category, and so that carries specific numbers that are related to your existing population, your existing number of housing units, your existing land area. So it's all customized to you based on the state's big picture goals here. And I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but I do want to just give you a sense of what's on the line here. So the state has some enforcement tools at their disposal, and there's two ways that they're doing that enforcement. One is explicit legal enforcement, and that's related to fair housing law, anti-discrimination law. So that's a legal tool set. The second sort of enforcement tool that they have is withholding funding. And so there are real consequences to this. So that's something that we want to just help you understand. We're not here to, push it forward. We're here to just make you aware of what's on the line. Okay. Understanding the basics of the law, there's lots of details here, but the big picture is that the state is looking for each community that's within that MBTA community's area to zone for multifamily by right in a portion of their community. And that's defined as 3 or more units on a single parcel, allowing for 3 or more units. Doesn't have to be that that's what's built. And that it has to be as of right, which basically means that somebody can follow all the rules in the zoning and move forward through site plan review and move forward with the development. So there's not a sort of a special permit that they have to argue their way through. They have to just follow the rules, and then they're allowed to pursue what they're interested in developing. There's some nuances around ground floor commercial, and also you can't have any restrictions on the basically the way that the housing gets used. In other words, who is occupying the housing, the age, the size of bedrooms, the number of occupants. So it has to be flexible enough to be able to meet the housing needs that exist in your community and in the region around it. And I'm going to come back to the ground floor commercial in just a moment. The state got a lot of feedback that where people want to do this is in their town centers, and the town centers are where you have commercial, and you want to protect the commercial. So the state developed this option to give you a tool to protect that sort of minimum commercial protection. So this is something that is an option for Hamilton and that we can make use of to protect those sort of critical commercial uses in your town center as part of this 3A approach. So the next piece, and this is getting into the details of the numbers for Hamilton. So I mentioned before, those numbers are tailored to each community. So the numbers for Hamilton are that we need to find a district that is at least 49 acres. That doesn't need to be all in one place, but it needs to total to 49 acres in order to meet the state requirements. The second set of sort of guidance or requirements is around the location of that district, and this is really intended to make sure that it's fulfilling the sort of the desire for this to be transit-oriented as much as possible. And so there's a requirement for at least 20% of the district to be within half a mile of the commuter rail station. So again, just 20%. It doesn't have to go above that. It can go above that, but that's the minimum. And then the second piece is that essentially the majority of the district has to be contiguous. So in other words, you can't just scatter it across lots of little parcels all throughout the town. It needs to have some sort of like center of gravity. So that's really to make it a coherent sort of zoning approach that can result in some of the benefits the state is looking for around sort of transit-oriented, amenity-rich places for housing. The last piece is density. And this is, again, to that goal of trying to encourage kind of more walkable development, places that can support a greater variety of uses and lifestyles to some extent. So 15 units per acre is the number that the state is using to measure that. And so that's kind of, you have to have zoning that allows for that level of density. And that's, will kind of, as we get further in the process, will help you to visualize what that means. I know it's a very abstract number. No one thinks in this way about housing. So we'll help you understand what that looks like. It's not as scary as it sounds. The last thing is, the last piece is the number of units. So the zoning has to allow for at least 731 units. Again, doesn't have to be all in one place, but that's the target that the state's looking for. All right, so with that, we have just a couple more slides here. So we wanted to give you some sense of proportion. So what does 49 acres mean for Hamilton? So this kind of blue square here is to scale 49 acres. If you think about the entire area of Hamilton, that's what we need to kind of look at, you know, where in Hamilton might that go, and what's a good fit. And then if you zoom in, and you'll notice we just put it outside of Hamilton because we're not talking about where it's going right now. And then if we kind of zoom in and we think about that relative to the town center, this is again that 49 acres in proportion to that half-mile kind of radius around your commuter rail station. So that just gives you a sense of kind of scale. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so I just before we close out, I just want to acknowledge that, you know, we've done a lot of 3A work in other communities. It is always controversial. It is often quite divisive. We just want to acknowledge that up front. Our ask is, and our charge from the town is to, okay, this is a mandate. It came down from the state. We need to explore what compliance actually looks like, and at a minimum, try to imagine what compliance looks like in a way that is either good for the town or at least the least bad option that will give the residents a chance to sort of vote on this. And so we have, in other towns, I think, come up with solutions that we think actually made sense from a planning standpoint. It's important to acknowledge that the rules of 3A are a little clunky, and sometimes they don't fit perfectly with what a town wants to do. But on the whole, we feel confident that in other towns we've gotten pretty close to something that makes sense from a planning standpoint. And so our ask is for you to keep an open mind while we at least see what that looks like.
Thanks, Matthew. So I think the last thing we have here is just to kind of get you oriented to what's next. So we have here a QR code. If you point your camera at it, it'll take you to the project website. We just put that, it's live as of today. I promise it's not going to be anything unwanted. You know, it's just information. And that's going to be your hub for information throughout the entire process. Everything that we do, it will land there. So if you miss a meeting, if you hear something and you're not sure if it's right, this is where you should go to find out. the next thing to kind of do if you arrive at the website and you want to be kept in the loop, we have an email list that you can sign up for. That way, each time we have something that is coming up, a draft work product, draft recommendations, or we've launched a new engagement tool, we will notify you via email so you'll know right away. So go ahead and do that if you're interested. And then in the next couple weeks, we're going to be launching a visioning survey to start getting input from you all. And then we will also be firming up the dates for the visioning workshop, which is, we're targeting July for that. So I know it's coming up soon. So we'll get that date settled real quickly and get it out to you so you can start planning around it. And once again, every single meeting we do, those materials will go up on the website. So don't worry if you can't make all of the meetings, we'll still make sure we keep you in the loop and that there's ways for you to provide input. I think we'll close there.
So I started to say at the beginning, and then I got lost track because we got Zoom bombed, and it was really unsettling. I think I would like to express to everybody that there isn't anybody in Town Hall and any of the elected offices that I know of that is like a big fan, rah-rah, we need to adopt 3A the way it is right now. When the law came out, communities such as ours were asked to comment on it, give feedback to the legislature. We did that. We pushed back on a number of things in 3A and told them why we didn't think it would work if it was passed the way it was passed. The response back was crickets. We got nothing. They took our commentary and didn't even respond to it. They passed the law anyway. We pushed forward. We asked again when they were adopting the regulations. We made comments then. I signed onto a letter with a dozen or more other towns to push for certain things in the regulations. Again, the state under it was then Governor Baker and his Housing and Economic Development Secretary. They just pressed on with what they wanted to do. We knew that this was coming. We asked the state to give us some help to try to understand it, and they provided some grant-funded engineering expertise. They worked with Patrick through 2 iterations, by the way. The first thing that they gave back to us, we said, this is ridiculous. This doesn't do anything for the town at all. You look at this again. Patrick met with them again. They went back. They came back with something slightly better. We discussed it. I think Patrick discussed it with the planning board. We realized it was not something that was going to work for the town of Hamilton. We understood that the product that was being given to us by the state-funded consultants was not, it was cookie cutter. It was just, here, this will meet your requirement. But it wasn't going to help us. It was probably going to hurt us. And so that was a time in the background, and I forgot to mention Rick Mitchell from the HDC is here as well. And since then, Rosie Kennedy has joined us and a few other folks. So Corinne Kale, our town clerk. So we've got a lot of people here in the room that are working every day on your behalf to try to help us do the right thing for the town. So in the background, we were talking to the Hamilton Development Corporation about wanting to have a plan for the downtown. The planning board, as I said, has been talking about form-based code for 2 years. And against the backdrop of understanding that what was presented to us was horrible and wanting to have something better, I asked through the select board and the FinCom in January if we could include an article in the warrant to ask for $125,000 that we could use to hire our own consultants so that we could take control of this process, so that we could decide what is the best thing for Hamilton in this unwelcome environment. And that's what this whole process is going to be about with 3A. We're not trying to say that we are pushing forward to pass it. We're trying to say that we want to study it and understand it a lot better than what the state was giving us, so we can see if there's something there. Are there some benefits? We know that we have things that Hamilton Development Corporation wants us to do in the downtown area. We want to make sure that our business center is vibrant and has enough people to support it. We want to make sure that that whatever development comes along in the future, whether it be through 3A or something else, is consistent with what our town looks like. We want the town of Hamilton to continue to be the place that you all love and call home. So that's the purpose for the form-based code. That's the purpose for this whole planning process. If we're able to get something out of it that we can present to town meeting next year, that's the way we speak to the state. That's the best way we can speak to the state. And as I said, we're already going to be on their naughty list because we're going to miss the deadline in December. But I don't see any way to go through a process other than that way. So, please work with us. Keep an open mind. be honest, tell us what it is that you think, tell us what it is that you think is acceptable. We can find ways to work that into the plan. That will help us all. And take advantage of all the opportunities to reach out and participate in the process. UTIL is one way. You can also contact my office. You can contact Patrick's office. Our email addresses are on the website. You can call Town Hall and ask to talk to us. We want your input. That is why we're doing this. So nothing's been decided. Caroline, would you like to say anything as the chair? And then we're gonna hand it over to Eric.
That is a light. Hey, y'all. Caroline Beaulieu, Chair of the Hamilton Select Board. I thought this was great. Thank you, UTIL, for going through that. I was talking to 2 residents before this began, and I did want to clarify a couple of points that I know sometimes the misinformation gets disseminated very quickly. This is just a change of zoning. It does not give land to the state. Whoa.
Please, look, we're here engaging with you. We want to hear from you, but that's not respectful. We're not, it's not the truth. So, the truth is the state wants us to pass zoning, which
They want us to pass the zoning.
but there's no conveyance of land in this.
Right, there's no, there's not.
Somebody just said that
The land is private. Our land belongs to either the town or it's private land. We would pass zone the same way we have downtown district zoning, or we have other districts. If we pass the zoning, the land would still have to be purchased by a developer with a housing plan, which is where the form-based code comes in. This is not a transfer of 49 acres to the state. It is applying. I'm not suggesting whether it is or isn't. Somebody came before the meeting and was under the assumption that we were going to transfer 49 acres of zoned land to the state. That is absolutely untrue. It is literally saying this land has by right multifamily zoning approved on it. So developer, if you buy this land, you can put multifamily housing here by right without having to go through a special permit process. The only difference between that and the current downtown zoning that we have, which allows for multifamily, is that a developer would have to go through a special permit process, which we would control. It takes that element of control over what the developer can build there. It minimizes that. I'm not saying that's good or bad or indifferent. I'm not saying I'm pro or con. I want to be clear that we are not transferring land to the state of Massachusetts. We couldn't. If your house falls within that zoning district that we decided to approve on, they can't come seize your house. You would have to sell your house to somebody who wanted to do this. You absolutely, we still live downtown. They put multifamily downtown because it's zoned for it through a special permit. We live there. You have to sell your land for somebody to take it.
Point of clarification.
Yes.
How can you say you're ambivalent if the town gives up control of the zoning of those 49 acres? You have to take a stand. Either you're in favor of it or you're
I do not actually have to do that at all. What I have to do is support a process. No,
here to represent us.
I am. I'm trying right now to represent both sides.
No, but you're here to represent us.
There are 2 sides of y'all.
No, you
The entire town, we are,
Other towns have, their select board have taken a stand and said no.
and I appreciate that they have done that.
No.
We have
The board stood up for those towns and stood up for those townspeople, and it was.
we
done.
have not
No.
approved anything. We have not even put a plan before.
You're trying to sell it to us.
We're not trying to sell anything. I'm going to pause. This is the same,
interim compliance.
I,
If you go look at the state website, Hamilton is an interim
because
compliance.
we have done nothing.
Action plan submitted by these 2 gentlemen.
So what I'm asking is your request of the town government, if the state comes to me with anything, my personal opinion about that thing should allow me to tell the state to go pound sand without going through due process to understand the perspectives of the constituents of this town. That is what you're asking me. That I have full authority to decide at my discretion to tell the state what I decide I don't want to comply with. I do not think that's true. My job is to go through a process that allows the town to put their feedback forward, and then the town will vote. The town will vote.
That's right, the town will vote.
Absolutely, and you may vote it down, but you may not say to me that my job is unequivocally to take a singular position and not allow a process by which the town gets to have a say. That is not what you mean. Because if this was an issue you agreed on, and I came forward and said, I'm not going to entertain your position, I'm going to say no, you would be on the other side of this argument.
Here's the challenge, okay? The town is in interim compliance because the town has submitted an action plan to comply with 3A and the state has approved it. We're in interim compliance, you cannot deny that.
We have
And
not
it's-
passed zoning.
I
We
didn't say
have
that.
not passed
You're in
zoning.
interim compliance.
No one can build anything if we do not pass
We are
zoning.
in interim compliance, it is a fact.
That is
We
true.
bought
That-
time.
that is true. All we did with that was we filled out some forms, and Patrick did it with the help of the Hamilton Housing Authority and a couple, I think a member of the planning board, and there were a couple, excuse me. Look, as the select board chairman just said, there is a process to do anything, right? I can't, as the town manager, say, we have to do this or that without going through the select board. The select board can't say, we have to do this or that without going through town meeting or hearing from all of the people in the town. That's why we have the town meeting. That's why we'll have a vote on it. Interim compliance just meant that it gave ourselves time to study it. And unfortunately, we're going to wind up with less time. We're not taking, Rick, we're not doing,
Could you talk about what the actual process is? Is it just one vote?
no, so it'll be, so the process as I see it is what's going to happen here next is that Util's going to do their work. They're going to go out, first and foremost, they're going to develop a form-based code for our town center, which is something we want. They're also going to look at ways that we can try to, ways to work with 3A and see if there's something in there, in the discussions with you all, with the public visioning sessions, with the surveys, see if there are ways in there that we can find something that we think would actually be helpful to us or minimally disruptive that we could present to town meeting through the planning board process. When Util's got their draft work done, they will present it to the planning board. The planning board and Util will take it through the process with more public hearings, more public input.
Planning board has to approve it before it goes to town committee?
Not required to approve it. What normally happens in the town of Hamilton is that zoning goes through the planning board. State law does allow the select board to take stuff through to town meeting. This town, as far as I know, certainly not in the 5 years I've been here, zoning hasn't been presented by the planning board, by the select board. It's been only presented by the planning board. Our goal is to do the same thing here, to follow our normal process in town, follow the process through the planning board, see what comes out of it, get it to town meeting floor for a vote. If it fails the town meeting floor, it fails the town meeting floor. The thing that you have to understand is that that vote, that decision will come with some consequence. And the responsible thing is to make sure that as many people as possible know about what the potential consequences are before we make that vote. That's why we want to follow this process. We want to have.
So the process that was planned.
That's not persuasion. We're not trying to talk you into anything.
It's the process that we showed you. UTL putting together a comprehensive plan that decides what the form-based code is, where we would want the designated 49 acres to be, how they may look form-based code. We present that to the town at town meeting.
One vote.
It would probably be a form-based code warrant article separate.
That's the way zoning is usually approved. Zoning usually goes through the planning board to the town meeting. It's voted in one meeting. No, that's what we're going to do. Yeah, one vote, town meeting.
It'll go to town meeting, and at that town meeting vote, people can say, we reject the plan, in which case we turn around to the state and say, Hamilton rejects 3A. We found a plan that we thought everyone would like.
They don't.
They don't like it. We reject it.
So, yeah, actually, interestingly, yes. So the Milton town has a charter that allows for the voters, through a citizen's petition, to establish a ballot question to reconsider something that they don't like that the town meeting did. You don't have that here. You'd have to defeat it at town meeting. But town meeting in Milton approved the 3A zoning that was developed. The voters who didn't like it got a citizen's petition question together, got it on a ballot, and convinced enough voters in the town to reject it, and that's why the town got sued by the state. Now that case is going to be heard by the Supreme Judicial Court in October, so we're going to know a lot more about that process and what the state's and what the court's opinion is at that time. Interim compliance doesn't mean that we're doing anything beyond agreeing that we're going to look at this law and try to put something in front of town meeting. That's all we really did.
Means that once you submit the action plan, EOHLC monitors your progress
Yep.
against it.
Yep.
Is it possible to get a copy of the action plan?
probably. Do you have? Yeah. Is it on the website? We can get it on the website. Yeah. We have, let's
Yeah,
grab that.
let me grab
right
the
there.
mic. One second.
Can we let Eric speak, or do you want to just go on this for right now?
Thank you.
Okay, can you please?
Stephen McWhorter, 18 Cunningham Drive. I have a question about the presentation I just saw. If you look at it, more than 50% of that circle is in Wenham. So they're overly penalizing a very small town with a formula that's unfair. That doesn't make any sense. What's Wenham doing on that other side of that circle? Why is the 50 acres on the wrong side of the line?
So there's a similar half-mile radius circle on Wenham side of the line. They have their own requirements to try to meet. They're, according to what we heard from their planner today, they're planning to move forward for a special town meeting vote in this fall. We have been trying to engage them to find out what their plan actually entails. We've heard some rumors, but we haven't really been briefed on it. We haven't been able to get the two planning boards to talk yet. I'm hoping that we're able to get that to happen soon. We only have to do in our town. So, right.
But you're putting the whole 49 in.
So there's another example of like some information that's out there that's not completely accurate. We haven't proposed it. No. The 49-acre blue square was not on our side of the map at all. It was just to show you by scale what 49 acres would look like, and to show you that it could fit in our side of the circle. But we're not actually looking at that. We've asked them to look at several other pieces of property around town that may be able to take some of that burden. As the presentation showed, only 20% of that area of that 49 acres has to be in the downtown near the commuter rail station. It may be likely that more than 20% of that would be downtown, but I don't really envision us going forward with only one multifamily district and all of it being downtown. I think that's ridiculous. I think it would be ridiculous for us to assume that we would even be able to put 731 units in a half-mile radius around the train station. So we're not trying to do that at all. Again, we've said from the beginning, a lot of people are out there saying that it's going to mean this, that, or the other thing. The fact is, we don't know what it's going to mean yet because we haven't even started to study it. That's what we're doing now. Well, I mean, you and I could have beers over what the state doesn't know.
Well, Wenham has their own set of
No.
Wenham has their own set of requirements and units and space and all of that.
That-
Separate from us. They have like 300. I don't know what theirs are. Yeah, so that's I don't know how this works, but maybe.
I don't need that. I got a big mouth.
Okay.
My name is Salvatore Celeste. I'm from 20 Puritan Road in Wenham, and I'd like to enlighten you guys as to what happened at the Wenham. Couple of disturbing things. First off, the way they tried to sell it was verbatim exactly what you said. They said, this is a zoning exercise, and all we want to do is comply by making this zoning area for three-family, multi-family units, affordable housing, but we're not going to do anything. We're not giving up any land. We're just going to let it happen. Now, I found that a little bit disturbing because it was almost verbatim, which I found strange. Next part is, hold on, hear me out.
With all due respect, this is excuse me, this is a meeting for Hamilton residents.
You need to know what's going on in Wenham, because I'm very concerned what's going on here. Part of it is very disingenuous, and what it is, they're showing you a circle, but what they're omitting is 1/3 of the impact of what's going to happen here. That blue line that runs to this train station, it's imaginary. That circle is going to have 1,000 units in it. Yeah, no, let me speak. I know a lot of developers, and they're salivating to come through that open door. Trust me on this. Second part is, and this is even the more important part, when we have very limited resources, and unless Hamilton has a hidden pipeline to the Quabbin Reservoir, okay, that I don't know about, you're not going to not only be sprinkling your lawns, you're going to be taking showers once a week. The second part is, when they say that it's going to happen in this area, that's a congested area, okay? And it's going to represent almost 1/3 of the population of what we got right now. We can't support that. It's affordable housing. Now, they showed us all these nice houses. They did that exactly in Wenham as well. And you go, wow, these are beautiful. Well, when you have those types of housing units, which are affordable housing, what happens, and I was born in Peabody, and I watched this happen. Here's how it happened. They came in, and the first thing they said is, we want to consolidate the school. Great. And they said, well, what are you going to do with the property? And they said, oh, we're going to make parks. We're going to make all kinds of public units. No, what happened was, after they put in the affordable housing, and they did the consolidation of the school system, which turned out to be bad, because rather than have small classes in separate units, they had large classes, and then what ultimately ended up happening was the old school, no, all the old, wait, let me talk. The Stieglitz, the Kennedy, and the Higgins High School, which used to be the Memorial High School. What did they do with them? They turned them into affordable housing. That's what they did. All of those nice buildings, they had HOAs at first, and then people couldn't afford the HOA. So then they had to call in the state. And then, if you drive through Peabody, go look at all those beautiful homes. After 4 years, they deteriorated. And what's down there is an absolute circus. They're being disingenuous. The reason why is they're not showing you the impact. Now, I asked.
The point of the process is to show impact. I cannot have you come to a Hamilton meeting and single-handedly, you've gone through the school, and I understand that, but nothing has happened yet.
You're telling us what happened in Peabody.
I respect that I respect the position. By a show of hands, who has come here because you are anti-3A and would like us to be totalitarian anti-3A? I understand and respect that position. I acknowledge, because we have not started the process. That's why our consultants are here to kick it off. Why we said.
What? Okay. All right, so.
What process have we
With due
started?
respect, you've had a lot of time to talk. I have a lot of Hamilton residents that I think would like to talk. Please. So, yes, I will tell you right now, all right?
Selection process for who's on that.
I was anticipating a question. I can answer that. I'm uncomfortable saying this stuff because I don't like to say, hey, I'm the town manager, I do this, I do that. The fact of the matter is we have a Town Manager Act that established my position, and it gives the town manager the authority to hire consultants and sign contracts and do all these other things. The consultants in the procurement process had proposed a stakeholder engagement. In talking with the folks, we decided that we wanted it to be a little bit more robust than that. We wanted to identify as much as possible a broad area of people that could represent just different viewpoints, different perspectives. Keep bearing in mind that we've had a lot of correspondence, emails, people at public commentary meetings submitting their thoughts about it, and understanding that we wanted to have somebody representing the business community, somebody representing various boards and committees that are going to have to analyze all this stuff. I asked a member of the Hamilton Development Corp., a member of the Planning Board, who is knowledgeable about about multifamily zoning, form-based code rather, as well as 2 staff members, to help me. Like, I don't make any decision in a vacuum. So I don't know everybody in the towns. Give me some names of people who can represent the business community. Give me some names of people who have been around for a while, work with the community house or work with the HDC. Give me some names of people who would be open to this. And by the way, we have this list of 15 or 16 people that have been emailing us. Let's pick a couple of those people that we think would help inform that other side of things. Ultimately, once I signed the contract with UTIL, I was responsible for providing them with the name of, whether you want to call it stakeholders or focus groups. We chose the name advisory committee. In retrospect, maybe that was a poor name. It is, as they said, a group of people that can can provide some consistent feedback throughout the process. Where are we getting things wrong? Where are we getting things right? What do you like? What don't you like? It's not a committee that's going to have any votes. It's not a committee that's going to control the process. They're informing the consultants so that they don't go too far afield in one direction or another. And ultimately, they were appointed by me. But I sought input from multiple other people so that nobody could say that the town manager handpicked who we wanted.
Okay. And so, but are there people on the advisory committee that are, who vehemently?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Wait a minute, vehemently believe that this is an overreach from the part of the state?
Yes.
Yes.
Sarah Lobinger is on the advisory
Sarah
committee.
Lobinger, Tom Connors
Tom Connors,
on the advisory committee.
both, like also on the lawsuit for the state, the lawsuit against the state. They're on the committee. Abutters. It's a very
We did our best
balanced
to
group
balance
of
it.
people.
And we didn't appoint anybody. We invited, they said that they could handle a group of between 12 and 15 people. So we invited 15 people. 13 of them said yes. That's where we're at.
So my understanding of what you're telling us is that when we're saying, well, we are on an interim okay status with the state, all that means is that you've shown them this particular schedule.
Yeah, process. We're
process.
moving through trying to do this, right?
Schedule.
Right. And as it was pointed out, they'll be checking in to see how we're making. And along around about October, November, December, they're going to start getting angry with us.
Well, why do we have to?
Because we're not going to make that December deadline.
Well, never mind.
Yeah, sure. Deb Safford is on the advisory committee.
Deb's there. Yeah, here. I think it's on, but if not, there's a button.
Do I have to stand back there?
No, there's just
Oh,
unless it's making noise.
I don't know who. So I think one of the issues that we're dealing with and why there's a lot of sort of tension in the room is because we're being asked to do a zoning situation that the state is dictating the parameters, which we wouldn't do normally. And so there's a lot of resistance. So I think when we say the state's going to own it, it's because the state's telling us how to zone for it. And therefore, and their guidelines keep changing. And, you know, to be in compliance, like that's a temporary thing. And so I think that that's a reason for some of the concern about it, just to understand it. So yeah, we're not transferring ownership, but we do know the developers would like it and that they can pay cash for a lot of people's houses and it would be developed. If it's going to be zoned for that, it might be there. I just wanted to clarify that. And there's a sense of, I guess, being pushed to do it. And I think that's, you know, the energy in the room for those who are concerned is because, you know, the state's dictating how the suburban, rural community, you know, not urban development, but suburban, rural is what we are. And so we just really have to make sure that we have that represented in the plan. So for UTIL, I have a question. I understand you're going to be doing form-based code, and there was a I think you had just said that there's going to be something that's going to be voting on that says this is how the 3A would work within this form-based code. Vote yes or no. So my question is, can you guys do, and will you be doing a form-based code that is independent of 3A? So that there would be something that's like form-based code and then something that would be compliant with 3A so that we don't have the convolution of them.
And honestly, I think we're still trying to work that out. We've had some of these conversations about that because I really want to make sure the town has a form-based code that we can say
And
yes
I think
to,
I
regardless
mentioned that
of 3A.
at the first meeting. I asked if that could
We're still trying
be.
to work through what that looks like. But
I think that's really important. I think from the integrity of the community, I think if we can pull out 3A from what UTIL does, and if we can pull out, I'm so sorry, I'm hitting you. If we can pull out Winthrop as well, these are supercharged topics, both of which have to be voted. And I think it would be a waste of our resources if all the consultants work on is a 3A integrated form-based plan, including Winthrop. I think these things have to be in separate buckets. And I think Jonathan Poor, I don't know if he's here, but he's the one who brought that up originally about doing 3 buckets. And I would hope that the work that you do as the deliverable would include sort of separating those out. I also think it would be helpful if we could get information from the consultants about the amount of services that have to be increased for the population that would be coming in, should they be built. So looking at water, looking at public services, looking at education, we're building a building or we're not building a building. I think that those have got to be paramount. It can't just be the structure. I think to really be a valuable deliverable. It has to be a full picture. Like, we can't just make these decisions in a vacuum. We've already talked about the water. We've talked about a lot of different things, and I really hope that we can address the actual consequence of having these things developed, because they will be developed. If you build it, they will come. And if you zone it, they will build it. The other thing that I would love to know that no one seems to be able to answer us is on commercial space. There's a lot of people that say, we got to have, increase in commercial because then it's going to help our taxes. But, commercial brings a lot of cost with it. And I would love it if within this plan, since we're looking at mixed use of multifamily and commercial, if there's a sense of actually, if you do this and add this much commercial, what's the real consequence to our tax dollar? Like, how much square footage commercial do we have to add to be able to?
A lot more than you want to add.
I know, it's like 1 million, which is like 100 CVS's. And so I think, I'm sorry, I just want to finish that, because there's just a lot of marketing that goes into this, right? There's the, let's project that we're going to consolidate. The select board did their vote on March 18th, and they said, let's renew the lease to Cutler for 30 years so that we can project our support behind that consolidation, because we want to show our support about commercializing Winthrop. That's almost a quote from someone. And so I think that that's really important, that how much of Winthrop would have to be renovated into commercial space to actually have an impact. So there's this misnomer that if we add some businesses, it's really going to help us. And I don't think that that's the case. So just some really good points. I think be great to work with you on these things, but these are the deliverables that we have to make it factual, not emotional, and that people have the information to really make a constructive decision instead of an emotional one, or one based on lies from what the state thinks they're going to do or not do. The last thing was, how much money would we be foregoing if we didn't do 3A? I think that's an important number too. How much grant money are we actually getting? Is it 28,000, which I've heard? Because now they're adding more. So just a few thoughts to try and clarify what the deliverable is to make it useful. Thank you.
So we're not going to be able to answer all those questions right now, but it's valuable to have them. We're recording this. We'll be able to provide those answers over the course of time. There was another part of this, because a couple folks have referenced it with the school site, and we wanted to at least have Eric talk to you a little bit about their process and what they've done. It's 8 o'clock now. We got about half hour to an hour left. I think we're going to lose our superintendent, our school committee chair here, because she has another engagement that she's not going to be here much longer. If you allow me to let Eric speak briefly, I know that Rick, who's been a part of the HDC and helping us get the consultants on board, would like to speak too. So let me give it over to Eric. Yeah.
If anyone does not believe how far along in the process this is with the state, I urge you to go tonight on mapc.org website. Search Hamilton. You can search your own house, you can search your neighbor's house, you can search every property in that little circle. Click on it. It will show you what it shows every developer that's looking at Massachusetts. How many units they can put where your house is. How many units that can go on your neighbor's house. This is what's coming. They already have it all planned. And I'm not saying they meaning the town. I mean they, the state, and the developers. I can look up my house. I can look up every house of every person in this room. It is frightening. mapc.org.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe asked me to come and just give an overview of the process that we've gone through since, it goes back many years, with the submissions of what they call SOIs, or statements of interest, on our elementary schools mostly. We have also submitted statements of interest on things like our high school roof to try and get state support. We were accepted in 2022 for a Cutler school project. We had submitted SOIs for all 3 elementary schools. The state came in and looked at all 3 elementary schools and said we would support, something to do with Cutler or something to do with Cutler and Winthrop, but we would stay out of the Bucher process, if you will. So they came back to us and said that they would invite us into the program. They gave us 4 options to work with. something as basic as just renovating the Cutler School or building just a new Cutler School, to something of combining some grades like 3 through 5 with a larger number of students to a little bigger, to a K to 5 with just Winthrop and Cutler, and then a district-wide reconfiguration of 1 through 5, which would put all of our first, second, third, and fourth, fifth graders in the same building. That process went to town meeting in 2023 for the feasibility process, which is the third stage of the eligibility process for MSBA. The initial one is kind of the invitation, and then you go through this jumping of hoops to decide, you know, what things that the state would like to have in line, and then they invite you into feasibility. We're invited into feasibility, which required a vote at town meeting for funding to be able to fund that process, which is engaging an OPM and an architect, which is an OPM is an owner's project manager, and it really gives us the opportunity to look at what all the options were. Those two agencies both asked both towns, Hamilton and Wenham, what types of properties they had available that might be useful, that would fit a school in general. I think it was like a 7-acre minimum. The towns gave us a list of all the properties that were available on both sides. It was over 20-something properties. They went through and vetted each property for buildability or fit, if you will, for an average size elementary school, and then they looked at things like wetlands, they looked at things like access. Some of the properties were landlocked, so they weren't able to be used. Many of them, quite a few of them actually were wetlands, lots of wetlands, which is why they're available. One of them was a cemetery, and the topographical issues came up with a couple of the other sites, mostly hilly and non-buildable area that was combined with wetlands. So that process brought us through winding down from all these different possibilities into, okay, what's really usable and useful? And they really came down to the 2 sites of the Cutler and Winthrop schools to be able to use those sites without wetlands, without those issues, because there were already schools on those sites. And it made sense for what we had available. After that process, the architects and the OPMs build out opportunities of each of the models across the 2 sites. So, you know, the state requires you to look at and vet multiple models, like the model of just a renovation, just what they call a code upgrade, bringing it up to scale, which would have been extensive in the Cutler School. A renovation, an add reno, which they call an addition renovation, or new build, or a consolidation. So those were really kind of what the state asked us to look at. Going through that process, we looked at a number of options and availabilities for kids and across, you know, what we had available now. In also the site availability, the process of school building committee was almost a year long, and yeah, just almost exactly a year long. And they worked down through all these different models. There were, I think, 14 originally, and came down to 4 or 5, and then down to the conclusion of the consolidation of Cutler and Winthrop, but also allowing the redistricting of all of the first, second, third, and fourth grade, first through fifth graders in the district. And that was kind of debating where that would go, what that would cost. Each of the sites had different prices. They you know, prices ranged from, I think, as low as $80 million all the way up to over $160 million, depending on the site and location. So the building committee made a choice to support the consolidation option, which they called C3.4, and that basically combined Cutler and Winthrop, but allowed the first through fifth grade across the entire district to go into one place, and then gave us the opportunity to still use the Bucher as a kind of a pre-K. We have 3 pre-K classrooms and 7 kindergarten classrooms that would actually fit in that building fairly nicely. So that kind of played itself out through the process. As it, yeah, I'll tell you in 1 second. Yeah, I'm just going to walk through this. So from that point, we got to the end of the line with the school building committee. The school committee took over from there, and they reviewed the school building committee recommendation to the committee. They went through a process. They actually put a pause on the process for a couple of months so that they could do a survey of the community more deeply, brought in a professional survey company did a survey across the district, which was presented last meeting, which was June 6th. Survey was presented, basically showed that nothing would be supported across the communities. They, in turn, voted. They had to make a vote, yes or no. They voted to support the school building committee's recommendation of option C 3.4, which was the consolidation model of the two schools, roughly at a cost of $150 million. And then from that point, it goes back to the state, and the state determines kind of the next steps, and we go into what they call Module 4, which is schematic design. Schematic design allows us to kind of take a deeper look at what happens inside that space, what types of rooms you need, types of programs you need to support the needs of your kids in the current programs, special ed programs, programs related to 504, any types of specials like music and art and STEM and all of those pieces. They all come kind of now into the puzzle and get built into this process that will take us into the fall. In the fall, the process kind of brings the state and school department together to kind of mesh through of all the things that are in what they call the building plan, like what's reimbursable, what's not. The idea is to really hone in on the reimbursables. We're currently looking at about a 47.6% reimbursement rate on the project from the state. That could change, it could go up, generally not down, but it can go up, and it can go up if you add in, just want to finish my thought. It can go up if you add in things like LEED certification, things like solar and energy efficiencies, geothermal, things like that. It can go down as well, you are correct, thank you, based on what they determine is reimbursable or not, and that's kind of the next process, the schematic design process. In the fall, then we finalize two things. We get a fairly accurate price of the project, and then we get a very accurate reimbursement from the state. So we'll have the actual number then in the fall. That continues on into the spring, goes to back to the school committee to vote to request funds. The funds get requested, and then town meeting in 2025 is the scheduled vote to support or not support that project. So that's kind of the short version of what we've done since 2022. Jeff, you've listened to it several times, but.
Whereas the schools are within that district, what did they suggest what the repurpose of the buildings would be if you did consolidate?
The architects?
No, the school buildings after the consolidation that would ultimately be abandoned.
No one suggested anything.
That's where the problem is.
Yeah, right. The state wouldn't tell you to do anything with the building that's not being used, but the town owns. The way our
Yeah, that's why UTO was talking about the
yeah, that's why they were talking. Yeah, that's why they were talking about it.
That's what happened as well, and then they ended up being affordable housing.
Yeah.
And that ultimately section.
So yes, they are in the zone. The state MSBA doesn't say you got to do this, and with the building. They just basically say it goes back to the owner. The current owner of the two properties and buildings is the town of Hamilton. Town of Hamilton owns the Cutler site, Cutler building, Winthrop site, Winthrop building, and then the town of Wenham owns the Bucher site and the Bucher building. We just lease them all through the regional agreement. The regional agreement requires us to keep a building in each of at least one building in each community. Hamilton has many more of the buildings in their community, and then Wenham has just the Bucher School, which is why I think that they stayed away from that Bucher School as a consolidated option because of the regional agreement stating you got to have a school in each community. So, but yes, you are correct. Go ahead. Yeah. Hi. Hi, Joyce.
Street, and I'm a grandmother, and I've only lived here 11 years, so I don't know if that says I get to say something. But I've also
You live here now.
Absolutely.
And I have seen what large classrooms can do to kids. And the idea of pushing all of these young children, I taught young children, of pushing them all into this enormous building is going to be so harmful to them. I can't imagine the teachers will be thrilled at all this huge, and if we're talking about building all kinds of homes for people to come into the city, not only is our water going to be taxed, but you're now dealing with probably double the number of children. So how long is that building going to be able to handle it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yep, great question. That's a great question. Go ahead, yeah.
My heart breaks for the kids of this town. We moved here because of how precious the center of town was. I don't know why we need to change it. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. I have no trouble walking around town. I love the fact that this community is the way it is. The taxes continue to go up, and we haven't even addressed the water problem yet. So now we're going to add on top of the raises and taxes we've had in the past couple of years, we're gonna add this $150 million building rather than upgrade and maybe add some rooms onto the other three schools.
Plus the turf field.
And the turf field, thank you for reminding me, the turf field, which has been proven to be toxic, more dangerous, cause more injuries, and yet we're going to push forward with that, which is not good for our kids.
Let me answer the question you had related to the classroom. The classroom sizes don't change. The state has a maximum classroom size, which is the same as ours. It's 22 roughly. The kindergarten's a little bit smaller, so they're not all. It has the same number of, it would match the classrooms we currently have for those kids. It would,
So, actually, you won't have to worry about the numbers of kids increasing because this tax increase is going to push us and many other people out of this town. Because we're not gonna be able to financially handle it.
Not to mention that a good portion of the value of my home is associated with good schools. That's why
You're all right about that, and that is exactly why all that will get voted on. Again, as the town meeting vote, there's also, specifically for the school, there's going to be a ballot question vote because it would require a debt exclusion, and that can't be done without all of the people in this room that are registered voters and all the people at home who are registered voters voting. So you ultimately make the decision whether that gets done. The thing is, in order for you to vote, we have to put something in front of you to vote on.
I understand. I just have one more comment, that I have been told by a very reputable source that if we don't go along with the governor and her wishes, that we're gonna lose like, I don't know, a little bit less than $50,000. Now, she might get mad and say, all right, I'm not gonna give you this or that. But you know what? I would choose independence from that nonsense.
About 45 minutes left. Rick, do you feel you need to say something, or can we let keep taking?
What happens with the votes? I remember with the middle school, there was a vote and a vote, a vote, a vote.
Yep.
And it went through. So can you explain what the process would be should it get turned down?
Sure. If it goes to town meeting, and remember, it has to have 4 votes. Both Hamilton and Wenham have 2 votes, the vote at town meeting and then the ballot vote. Town meeting's 2/3 vote, ballot vote's the majority in both communities. So you need all 4 of those. If it doesn't pass, look to our neighbors in Ipswich. They basically say, if you read the website, we've gone back and forth with the state, that they would basically make you re-enter the SOI project process from the beginning. And that's currently where Ipswich is in their process.
So it wouldn't be revoked after revoke? Like
No. So I live in Swampscott. About 12 years ago, 13 years ago, my oldest son was just getting ready to enter the school district, and he's now going to be a senior. So about 12, 13 years ago, we had a school project that was put before the voters. Town meeting said no, the voters said no. It took us 7 years to get back into line, and basically wound up approving the same project just on a different site. And now that school's going to open in the fall. But it would take you at least 7 years. Other towns have been longer. I really don't know why Swampscott lucked out and was able to get back in line in 7 years. But it's usually closer to 10 years. Swampscott was able to get back in line, maybe because both of the buildings that they want to replace were over 100 years old. Maybe that inched us up a little bit on the priority list. And they're just finally going to finally open that school in the fall. So even though 12, 13 years ago I voted for the project, I was outvoted by a whole bunch of my neighbors and friends, and that's fine. That's the process. And I voted for the most recent project too. My kids are never going to benefit from that, but they want to doing the same thing. Let's Jeff.
This is for Eric and the chair of the school build. So I know, Eric, you were a key in the school building committee, and you did recommend C3.4. And I think mainly because it was a cost benefit to that, right? It was better return on per student. I think it's what it came down to. But then when we had the vote on the 6th, in the face of the survey that had that one that was chosen as to be the most opposition from your own survey, and then there was a third option that was closer to being accepted. It was like 41 to 38 or something like that. I'd like the chair to speak to why they went with something against the survey's recommendations, as well as their own board member, Trent, gave a really compelling concern and imploring you guys to say, let's consider something that has a better option of passing. But we chose not to. So I'd like to know two things. One is, I know you weren't a voting member, but would you have chosen to say, you know what, let's go towards this because this has a better chance of passing? And then I'd like to know from the chair why they went with something that didn't seem to be like it's going to pass.
The 3.4 was the option that I actually picked. I'm on the school building committee, so that's the answer to that one. That was really what's best for the most kids. Every kid in our district would go from Bucher through a brand new school. Good for our staff. It's good for a lot of things, including having good places for our kids to be safe in school and to have access to the things that they need. Dana, do you want to?
I want to say a couple of things because you asked one. When you ask something why, as a school committee member, I can tell you why I voted. I can't get in the heads of everyone else and tell you exactly why they voted the way they voted. The committee did vote to put forward the consolidated option. What I will say is this, that, and Eric alluded this right off the bat, that there was a survey done, and it was pretty clear that we have an uphill battle to build any school.
There's one that's pretty close, though.
That we have an uphill battle to be clear that at town meeting it needs to be a 2/3 vote. It is an uphill battle no matter what. And so this is the part where that was from the poll. This is what I'm going to tell you about how I voted. I respect that there are differing opinions about how and what is the best option for a school. And for a variety of reasons, I believe this is the best option for our students. It has the capacity. The other options did not have extended capacity. This one does. If at some point in the future the town has additional students, this option has, as required by the MSBA, has plans for contingency plans to increase capacity if at some point that were needed. That's a requirement. So this option provides what I feel is the best option. It's a safe school. It's a school that is going to be equitable because all of our students are going to get to go there. Excuse me, I want to just speak. Hold on. What I said was a factual statement in that if you build a school that every student goes from grades 1 through 5, that is equitable. If you were to build one school, I don't understand why you're all shaking your head, because that is just a statement.
They don't know what equitable is associated with DEI.
Okay, what I'm trying to say to you is that if we are building a new school, if we are building, and you know what? Excuse me, I am here not to have you all yell at each other. So if you don't want me to answer the question, I will sit down.
I want you to answer. Please answer the
You know what? I actually heard people just say they'd prefer me not to answer the question. Okay. In my view, one of the benefits of a new consolidated school is that every Hamilton Wenham student gets to benefit from a beautiful, safe, accessible school. And that is what I think is best for the students of our district.
Can I ask a question? Just a simple one.
I'm gonna take a couple of questions and then I'm gonna look at Joe, and I don't know what you have other things to do, I know. Yes, sir.
The question I have is that the will of the people was made very, very clear. And as government representatives representing us as part of this republic, the school committee, and to use somebody's expression tonight, which I thought was great, basically the school committee said, go pound sand. We don't care what the town wants. We don't care what the people want. And there was a whole series of investigations that were put forward comparing school-based small schools and the educational benefit versus a mega school. We don't want a mega school. And I think the town has made it very, very obvious. And the school committee looked at all the people in that room and said, go pound sand. That's what they told us, and that's wrong.
So,
Like the Winthrop School of
so,
is
so,
joined at the hip with 3A.
so,
It's no coincidence that we're trying to eliminate that school and open up a parcel for compliance with a bad law.
so,
For this forum tonight, it's very informative, it's well presented, it's well done, and there is definitely a benefit to the communication that's been really lacking. So thank you for that.
I appreciate your thanking me, and we're going to try to, as I said at the beginning, we're going to try and do more of this kind of outreach. I think it's needed. But I just want to get to a couple of things that you referenced there. The Town of Hamilton Select Board, in 2015, the lease for the Winthrop School site was up in 2015. The Select Board at that time chose very specifically on purpose to renew the lease for 10 years for two reasons. From what I've been told, because I wasn't here, I didn't get here till the end of 2018, but from what I've been told, that my understanding was they wanted to align it with the lease at the Cutler School site. And they wanted the school department leadership to start looking at their facilities and what their needs were going to be going forward, because we knew already at that time, or they knew already at that time, that those buildings were going to need to do something, and without some kind of impetus, some reason to start doing something, that was likely not going to happen. So they only gave them a 10-year lease. They also did say at the time that if we want to grow our downtown at all, the Winthrop School site's the only site we could do it at. So that select board said at the time, we want to try to get that site back so that we can try to grow the downtown a little, but we want the school department, and the regional school district is a separate entity from the town. They wanted the school department to make a decision about what they needed for buildings, and that's when the school department started applying to the state with a statement of interest, trying to get into the list for the MSBA. Now, I will also say that is completely coincidental to the fact that 7 years later, the state passed the law. You can laugh. Respectfully, you can laugh, but the fact of the matter is the select board in 2015 had no idea that the state was going to pass the 3A zoning law. That was not known. None of us even imagined it. HDC wanted that site to expand to downtown. They didn't want to own the site. And the other thing is, all of this conveyance of land, again, has to happen through town meeting. The select board can't do that. The town manager can't do that. Conveyance of land can only happen at town meeting. The town owns the Winthrop School site. The only way anything happens at the Winthrop School site is if the Hamilton town meeting says the town can do something with it. It's the only, anything. Even if we pass 3A zoning and put 3A zoning over the site, if the town meeting says we can't sell it, nothing gets developed there. It can't happen.
If we vote no at the town meeting?
It goes away. Yeah. So I really want to be clear. And again, my purpose in asking for the funding to hire the consultants to look at this was, again, for us to take control of a state-dictated law that we don't really like, but we want to see what's in there that can be helpful to our goals. We want to see what's in there that we can live with. And is there a way to comply? I don't not know. I'm not going to tell you that there is. I'm not going to stand here and say there isn't. It's my job as your town manager to find out, to help us find out. And again, the other thing is that everybody talks about the fact, well, they want by right development. By right development doesn't mean that it doesn't get reviewed at all, right? They'd still have to comply with Conservation Commission. They still have to comply with septic. They would, because all construction in this town has to go through those processes. So if you give somebody the right, so if you buy a 2-acre parcel in the town of Hamilton that's in a residential 1A, you don't need a permit from the planning board or the ZBA. You can go get your building permit, as long as it has a certain amount of frontage, and as long as you can get the building plan through site plan review, which just wants to make sure you have a legal entrance onto the street, wants to make sure that, you know, where the house is going to be situated in relation to the size of the lot. They wants to make sure that you got, and then you have to get a septic permit from the Board of Health, and then you have to get a conservation permit. And there wouldn't be in a 1A district if you wanted to build a single-family home. You could build a single-family home with 8 bedrooms, and nobody could tell you not to. No, I understand. But what I'm saying is that we're talking about a kind of a fine point of what's.
The math isn't working out. You're talking about a school. The school option you guys are choosing is the 700 plus. If they were able to build 1,000 units down there, and you figure 2 adults and at least 1 kid, that's 1,000 kids that are going to be coming into this community. Where are you going to put them?
I
don't want
get
to
it.
bring up Peabody again, but if you look at the high school, it looks like a factory now. They're blocking the windows so they can make more wall space. And the bus bridge is now turned into classrooms, and they've got a couple of portable classrooms stuck in the back of that place. And there's thousands in there, and you know it. You know what happened there.
Again, I appreciate the voice. I appreciate the voice of Wenham. I do. I thank you. I thank you for having. I would like to get it. I understand that.
What happens in Wenham is going to affect you.
And so, I do want to allow HDC to speak for itself. I've said a few things on their behalf, and I think Rick wants to correct me.
Yeah, as I said the last school committee, I could be the skunk at the garden party here. But the reason I'm speaking is because the Hamilton Development Corporation actually contributed $25,000 to this study. But that's irrespective of why I wanted to speak to you tonight. First of all, thank you for everybody coming out and expressing your opinion. That's the whole reason for having this meeting and all the future meetings. Somebody was asking about the makeup of the advisory council. We recommended people that we knew were in opposition to this 3A, concerns about Winthrop, because we didn't want people who were yes people. We wanted people to be challenging the entire process, the integrity of the process, the outcome of the process from beginning to end, because those questions are critical to answer to convince people one way or another. So that's important. The other thing is, Joe alluded to this, but this is about the town taking control. I think what's missing here is the town has made a conscious decision to tell the state to go pound sand, okay? We are not going to meet the December 31st deadline that mandates acceptance of this. So yes, there was an interim plan because originally the state wanted 1,500 units. We negotiated and the planning board negotiated down to 731. But we recognized that was untenable. The public would never go for that. So the conscious decision was made, forget it, we're not going to meet the deadline, we'll take the consequences, but we want to take control, and that's the whole point of this discussion and the future discussions of form-based code. We would be doing form-based code if 3A was not around and if the Winthrop school site wasn't in play. We'd be doing this anyway because we want to control the future of our downtown, and we want it to reflect what you and everybody else in the town thinks is acceptable and would allow to have happen. So that's why we're doing this. I thank everybody for being here. Please stay involved. Please ask challenging questions. That's how we're going to get to either deciding we don't want to do 3A and take the consequences, and we'll figure out what the cost benefit is. That's up to you. Nobody says this has to happen, but I think what Joe is alluding to in the form-based code is, let's look at the options. And what I want to point out one other thing is, Joe alluded to, and this is true, the Supreme Court, based on the Milton case, on October 3rd, will hear the challenge to 3A. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but there are three potential outcomes. One is they reaffirm it and say, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, go right ahead and do what you've been doing. Two, they'll overturn it and say, legislature, you've got to go back and figure out whether you want to have this law or not. Or three, they're going to send it back to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and saying, you've got to go through a public process to develop guidelines, to develop regulations, because they only have guidelines, and that's what's being challenged. There's no regulations. In regulations, you have to go through a public process, public comment. So this is a great opportunity because it could be in December or January the Supreme Court rules, and it could be it's gone. So would be a great outcome. So anyway, we've got plenty of time, and
I have one over here that's been raising here for a while. I just want to. Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, you've been patient. I appreciate it. This doesn't go that far.
I
so.
don't know if
Yeah, so that's what.
Sure. I mean, you guys can start the mass exodus now, but you're the same people that are at all these meetings. This is your echo chamber. I do want a consolidated school because I know what the special ed kids at Winthrop are doing. They're sitting on a stage in a makeshift classroom. I do the landscaping for Winthrop. I take care of the indoor garden. It's not a school worth being proud of. You should walk in there. You should tour all 3 elementary buildings. They're not to be proud of. And if we just do Cutler, then we're going to have to wait to do Winthrop and Bucher 5, 10, 20 years, and it's going to be more expensive. But every single one of these meetings, it's the same, it's all 50 of you guys, and it's an echo chamber. And I'm sorry, but like the taxes in town are that's great, but I've got the mic. So you want to wait till I'm done? Okay, great, awesome. Go for it. We got the cheerleaders in the back. Yeah, mean girls, let's do it. Let's do it. Anyhow, I know, it's fine. I just want like UTEAL and new planning board members who have signed on to the litigation and have a conflict of interest. I live in Hamilton, not Wenham. And I have kids.
Sorry, we have the same.
I have kids in the district. Do you have kids in the district?
No, actually, but I do pay.
Do you, Nancy? Do you, Nancy?
Good school.
Oh, okay. I'm sure you'll find me because no, whatever. The fact of the matter is that the town voted for Caroline. She's here because the town voted for her. And you guys can come here and be rude and like just have no class, and congrats, but like, listen to the meeting. They're here to give us a plan and a way forward. You can vote it down. You can vote for it. But to be just so close-minded, like this town is not sustainable. We don't have a thriving downtown. I go to the Black Cow on a Friday night, I can get a seat. I go to any of those shops, I go to Crosby's, they close at 4. It's not sustainable.
It's great, that's why we moved here.
You can't get a gallon of milk for dinner. It's closed.
That's why we moved here.
And you're right. So some of you have moved here for that, and some have moved here for other reasons. And so the idea is that we have these community-wide conversations to hear all those perspectives, and then we try to develop a plan with all that information in it, and we put it in front of you at the town meeting. We put it in front of you at the ballot box.
Well, she's right about the schools. The schools do need to be improved, but a consolidated school does not.
I'm sorry, Steve. I've got other people that haven't spoken yet, and I'd like to try to get. I'm gonna allow Beth to say something real quick, and then I'm not gonna give the mic to any board and committee members. They have a platform that they can be heard all the time. So you'll be the last one.
Well, yeah, and I am speaking personally, not in any official capacity for the town. I don't know if Rick said there is possibly another opportunity. It could be that Home Rule has decided that the entire law is unconstitutional. So that is another possibility. I wanted to clarify that. And then I wanted to encourage people, if the select board is meeting next week and the planning board has voted unanimously to ask them to send an amicus brief, and that means a friendly brief on behalf of the town. And so if you think that's a great idea, let the select board know, because as the planning board, we thought that was a good idea, so we made a recommendation to them. I just wanted to share that process. Friendly to the Milton case that basically says, I mean, they're being sued because they voted the wrong way, is pretty much how that went down.
Michael Madden, Highland Street. Just want to say a couple of things. One is, I prefer if we didn't use terms like "you guys." There are many other words to describe what that means. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, there's a reason why there's nobody in the Black Cow on a Friday, Saturday night, is because it doesn't exist anymore. But the main point that I want to make, because we're all about equity, right? We want the same things that I hope you all want as our elected officials. And I would like to ask, where is the equity when a kid that walks to Bucher is no longer able to do that? They have to get up 45 minutes early, an hour earlier. Where is the equity for the same thing at Winthrop? There's no equity there. Where is the equity when they have to wait on buses that don't come for them? Thank you.
Some over here, and then I'll get to you. We're coming up about 15 or 20 minutes left.
I'll be really quick. I just wanted to say that I think it's awesome that there's engagement and passion, and also remind us all that we are a very small group in this room. There are a lot of people who live in Hamilton and Wenham who are not represented here, and so we should keep that in mind. This is not the be-all, end-all here. And I would also just say that a lot of the people up here are volunteering their time. I know some people are in paid positions, but these are volunteers who care about our town and ran for office and want to do good things for us. And I think we should just keep that in mind and be respectful. We live in a very small town. We are all neighbors. We see each other at the post, at Crosby's, walking our kids to school. And honestly, some of the passion has been really embarrassing here tonight and really disappointing, and I think we should strive to be better, all of us, regardless of what side you're on, because we're in this together. We're a small town. We all know each other. Let's try to be respectful.
Greg McKenna, Talia Drive. Correct me historically if I'm wrong, please. Somewhere in the last 10 years, there was a drafted, I think there were 40 feet about housing on the ball fields at Winthrop School. The chief of police categorically stated 1A Bay Road could not handle additional traffic, and the entrance would have to go from Walnut, Chestnut, Elm, Fox, Tally Ho, over the bridle path where the gas line is, onto the back field. So my question is, if 40%, if that's what's going to go on Winthrop, or whatever the percentage is, how is the traffic pattern going to work out?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to answer that question, and I think that's part of the thing. Again, the Winthrop School site is, the town had already identified the Winthrop School site as a potential place to grow. 2015. 2020, 2021, the state passed what we now know as the 3A or MBTA community housing law, and those two things are unrelated. They're both happen to be facing us at the same time. It's unfortunate. Certainly not something we planned on. It's not something that we want. I've said a couple times here tonight already, I think that the 3A law as currently written is a bad law. I think there's things about it that weren't considered properly, and I'm certainly willing to work with the select board and the town to push back on things and get the best deal we can for ourselves. But nobody in this process at all has said, oh, let's get the Winthrop School back so we can put 700 units or 400 units or any. There's no number of units that we're trying to put on the Winthrop site. I think that from a planning perspective, anybody would look at that site and say it's a buffer area between an existing neighborhood and a different type of existing neighborhood, and any planner would look at making that a transition. So if the town, and this is totally speculative, but if the town were to get that site back through a vote of the town meetings in both towns and a vote of the election in both towns, we'd get 14 acres back that we would then have to figure out, okay, we've got this zoning that we've looked at, what would make sense here? And then bring that proposal back to the town meeting again and get that approved before we could even think about creating an RFP to put it on the market and sell it. We're not trying to do anything that you all don't want. We're asking. We are really legitimately asking, what is it you want? I've definitely heard from a lot of you about what you don't want and what you don't like and what you're afraid of. I get all of that. That's all good input. I'm happy to have that information. I also need to know what you want. What is okay to change? What isn't okay to change? And that is a valid point. I've also had people in my office telling me we have to do X, Y, and Z to improve downtown. We need more density to support our businesses, because truthfully, part of the reason that the Post is empty on a Friday night isn't because it used to be called the Black Cow. It's because there aren't enough people in town that go out to dinner every Friday night.
That's something that Massachusetts is facing as a whole, because we're one of those states where there's been a population flight. People have headed out of here.
And so I really don't want to get into debating housing policy, but a big part of the data on that suggests that a part of the reason people are leaving, and anecdotally people I know that have left the state, have left because they couldn't find homes that they could afford. And the thing with remote work has made it easier for them to say, oh, I can take my position working for a financial services company, and I can live in Charleston, South Carolina, and still do the same job, and I can get twice the house for half the money. So they're going there. And so we have that challenge here in the state of Massachusetts. I think that the intention of community housing law, of the 3A law, was well intended. The state is trying to incentivize towns to allow some more housing because we need housing. Part of the reason housing is unaffordable is because there's not enough of it for the number of people who want to live here. But I think that they did some things strategically, technically wrong when they adopted it. I think it hurts small towns like ours, and we are going to make the case for that. We are making the case by doing this process, by inviting consultants in to intentionally look at something that's going to take us past our quote-unquote deadline. We're trying to do the right thing by you, but what I think the process needs, what I'm hoping you can give us, is the positives. What is it you want us to do? What kind of change is acceptable? So we can incorporate that stuff into what we want to do. Because without that information, we can run 15, 20 plans and people won't be satisfied.
Excuse me, Joe, I just want to answer that last point that you made. You know, the school committee went ahead and voted 5-2 in favor of the big school in complete contrast
I understand.
to what the poll said. And it wasn't a survey, it was a scientific poll. They went ahead and did their own thing. What makes you think that the people in this room believe anything that gets said about that when it was very clear in that survey that the big school was not preferred?
So-
We told you what we want.
Okay.
We told you.
I heard you.
It was ignored.
No, I hear you on that. All right. And what I can say is that the school and the town are two separate entities. I can't answer for what the school district, the school building committee has done. On the school building committee, I'm in regular contact with Eric. I understand their reasons for what they did, but I also understand your concerns. But I can't ask you, don't judge what we're doing based on what somebody else has done.
You're passing the buck, Joe.
No, I'm not. I'm telling you right now, I have never lied to you. I'm telling you right now, I've never lied to you. And so please judge me based on that.
The people that are in this room are hearing these facts. Is there any wonder why you get the reaction that you do?
I'm just asking you to judge me and the work that my department has, the work that the select board and I do together. Judge us based on what we do. I understand that some of you and some people in town have difficulty with what the school committee did. I can't answer that for them. That's not my job, that's not my role.
Where the two mesh though is on the lease issue, right? And it was that lease issue that had the select board just said, you know,
So the
30
select
days
board,
for both.
the select board did say at that meeting,
Finish, 'cause I studied that meeting. I literally have watched it so I can replay it in my sleep. And I saw how the decision was made, how people started out by saying, I don't think we should do that. I think we should not, like, we should let the town vote on. We don't want to look like we're leading towards one. And then through a series of discussions, they end up making a motion to do it, knowing that they were intentionally projecting to the community their support behind one of the projects because Winthrop was considered needed for 3A. And that was, it was literally quoted. So please, like,
yeah,
watch that
I would have to go back and watch it.
video from the select board. So that's where the two kind of overlap, right?
I understand.
So at town meeting, when that gentleman stood up and said, hey, FYI, there's a $150 million consolidated project coming down, but don't worry, we're gonna sell Winthrop for $20 million and it'll be fine. Like, that was like, that's when my hair stood up. I said, what? Right? And so they do mesh, they do kind of connect, and you can't just separate the two. It really goes down to the lease. And it seems to me that if the select board for 10 years was really wanting to get rid of Winthrop, that would have been a great question to ask the community before changing the leases, saying, are you guys interested in developing Winthrop for commercial uses? Yes, no. Like, that would have been a fascinating thing. Instead of giving the power to the select board to choose to extend or not extend because of their agenda, not necessarily representing the will. I mean, if people voted and they voted and they wanted to develop it, then so be it, right? That's the power of the vote. But our vote was taken away because Winthrop was taken off the choices. I listened to that select board meeting too when it said, well, it was only renewed for a few years, so we just put an X through all the Winthrop options.
Well, I think there was only one Winthrop option left at that point.
In December, when the consultants looked at all those projects, Winthrop was actually higher rated than Cutler for a consolidated location. So to have Winthrop be removed from us because of the opinions of those select board, that's where the two really intersect. And I think that there's concern about like listening and motives and how and like what's like the deep state of Hamilton, like what's going on with like things that we don't get to vote on. I'm not trying to be like a bully or anything. I'm just trying to be honest about it.
Right.
That's where it really gets to me as a resident of 30 years I've been here. I've been through a lot of the schools, and to have all this sort of going on in the background and not having had any idea of it is really disturbing. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that now. And that's where there's no trust. That's where it's been broken. And so the integrity of what the consultants do, the integrity of the people who are making committees and choosing, and people who have wanted to do it for 10 years, like they shouldn't have so much power where we get like. I used this mantra at one of the select board meetings a few weeks ago. You know, when you're with a little kid, do you want to walk upstairs or shall I carry you? Right? That's a question you ask your kid. You give them a choice. Do you want to walk or shall I carry you? Either way, you're going upstairs. Right? So think about that. As we're presented options, are these really options? Or is there a motive that's like where we're just sort of being corralled in? And that's where I think there's got to be like a heightened sense of transparency. And with the schools, and then I'll be quiet, I'm sorry, but with the schools, like we're doing this vote for the consolidation, and what's gonna happen is that then Cutler and Winthrop won't get renovated, even just by the repairs that need to be done. Why can't we do that consolidated vote, which you guys have decided, and have another warrant that says, you know, 50 whatever, 25 whatever to renovate Cutler, so we don't screw the kids in Cutler and like get pushed back 7 years. Like, can we think creatively, even though the state may not reimburse? Like, it might be the same cost. Like, is there a way to think strategically so we actually have a legitimate vote to support our children in our schools without it being 750 mega school or nothing, right? Like, that seems like a false choice.
All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left in the night here. I'm going to ask, is there anybody who hasn't spoken that would like to have something to say? Just. All right, so I've been asked to take a few minutes to talk about the Gordon Conwell land. So the Gordon Conwell, that's going to require another whole meeting. Well, it was listed as one of the things that we're facing, and I tried to say at the beginning of the meeting that we probably weren't going to have time to get to all 4 of those things, but I will say really quickly. Gordon Conwell has identified a buyer for their student housing. It's the 6 buildings and some associated land. It totals about a little more than 11 acres, a little less than 12 acres. There are 209 units of student housing there. They presented, they're in a purchase and sale agreement right now. There's a 60 or 90-day due diligence period. We've met, we meaning myself and the building commissioner, have met the buyers one time. They'll be asking questions. They've been into the building office a little bit. They've been looking for certain forms, not forms, but looking for some certain records and things to show how they can reuse the building. We've had legal counsel. We've had 2 separate legal opinions on what their proposal is, and so we're reviewing that. The select board has asked for me and the town council to work on a memorandum of understanding with the proposed buyers and a development agreement, quote unquote, with Gordon Conwell. Gordon Conwell's largely agreed to the terms the select board had asked. We're going to have a draft of that development agreement available at the select board meeting on Monday night for them to discuss with John, the attorney. And John has, at mine and the select board's urging, drafted a memorandum of understanding that we then present to the buyers. That hasn't been done yet. That's a more first draft. We haven't really discussed a lot of that with them yet. The idea there is that they would buy the units. Their proposal is to buy the units and operate them as market rate housing with some set aside for affordable. The select board has asked for 25%, and then we would make the case to the state that since it's a rental project and 25% of the units are affordable, we should get credit for all 209 units on our SHI. That is the case we're trying to make. That's the case we intend to make. The purchase and sale agreement between Gordon Conwell and the buyer lays out a scale of between 10 and 25% to be affordable. So Gordon Conwell has signed off on that already. The buyers are aware of our request, and they have not said no. That's the purpose of the memorandum of understanding. We're trying to get them to agree to that. That's going to probably require a little bit more negotiation and discussion. I'm always a cautious optimistic. It's just the way I prefer to go through life. I try not to be a pessimist, so we will hopefully see something develop in that over the next couple months. That would put those units on the tax rolls. Now, it wouldn't be like a condominium because I can't tax into each individual unit, but I could tax the property to the owner, and that would give us some tax relief, some additional tax benefit for the town, which would offset whoever moves in there that has kids, because as we know, that student housing was designed for small families because a lot of the seminary's students had children. So for the first time, since those units were constructed, we would actually get a tax benefit from the buildings that would help us afford the schools. So. To be determined. That question's been raised. We've asked those consultants to look at that, but I also have to talk to the buyers about that. We have to see what that does. From my perspective, this is me. I haven't had any direction from the select board on this yet, and I'd have to have a conversation with them. From my perspective, I think it would be a good thing for the town to see those buildings sold to a private landowner that we could tax. It would be beneficial to us. It would ensure that the buildings are kind of brought up to code and improved a little bit and are safer, and it would ensure that we get some new tax revenue that the town desperately needs. Asking them or letting them know that we were thinking about putting a zoning overlay over their property, that still has to be investigated. I think it's possible, but we need to answer some questions on that. And that might, if done, that might help us, but we still need to have that conversation with the new owners. We have to have kind of an internal look at, like, what does that do? What are the consequences of that action? So.
Is there any additional development within the 11 acres?
Not as currently constructed. So this is the thing, right? The buildings, and we finally tracked down the records. It looks like all 6 of the buildings were ultimately built under the Dover exemption, or with Dover protections. So that means that when they separate from the seminary, they will gain the status of pre-existing non-conforming use legally. And so they can be operated the way they were built, the way they've been operated, by a different entity, which would mean that we'd be able to collect taxes on it. They can't expand the footprint, they can't do anything different there, they can't add new buildings, because we don't have zoning in that area that would allow for that to happen. So that's some of the stuff we're trying to negotiate out. Real quick, I'm gonna let my good buddy here talk.
Tosh Blake, Sagamore Street. It's been a very entertaining from start to finish, for sure. And spirited, which is good. We don't want to get too spirited, but spirited is good. A few things addressing some of these points. I think Ms. Bolio, you mentioned about, I've heard this before, almost exactly from a representative from Harbor Light, which is a developer, and made this point, which I think is kind of gets people a little maybe angry, is when you say the zoning, it doesn't mean anything's going to be built there. But to me, that's like saying, okay, well, look, you have a house. We just want to get rid of the locks in your house. No one's actually going to go in there when you're not there or anything. Don't worry about it, but it's very suspicious because obviously zoning is kind of like a lock. It's a safeguard against unwanted effects. So if you say that, it sounds, not intentionally, but it sounds very patronizing. Like, oh, don't worry about it. Just removes the locks. Nothing's going to happen, probably. So just as a point of, because I've heard that from other sectors, that included interested parties like Harbor Light saying the same thing, and didn't get a good response then either. And buzzword, just another thing for the school. If you say equity, sometimes people are going to react negatively to that word just because it's a politicized word. Don't want to get too much into that, but I know you mean well. It's a legit word, but it gets a little loaded, let's say. But I think one question is, as you said, you've tried to get a good deal with the state and things like that. When they first proposed stuff, he's tried to negotiate early on with the state with units and things.
Yeah, Rick said the planning board. He was on the planning board at the time. The planning board and a lot of planning boards around the state pushed back on what the state was saying because the original projection was that the new zoning, if adopted, would mean 1,500 units for the town.
I think.
Yeah. Take credit for it, but it wasn't
Rick Mitchell.
Yeah. It was a lot of different planning boards, a lot of different city mayors and stuff pushed back and wanted the regulations amended, and they did amend.
That's good. I think one concern just about that point is it's good that you're doing that. I agree with that, and trying to push back. But I think part of the problem is, and maybe a lot more towns should have done this. I think only one town initially did push back on the initial request by the state to have some kind of preliminary plan. It was one town where a lawyer in the town said, "What is this? This is nuts, right? And we're not even going to give them a preliminary plan." So towns like Hamilton and others, you're not alone in this, kind of started negotiating with the state. And in a way, on principle, in my opinion, maybe a lot of other people's, the state is completely in the wrong, and it should have been on its face, and maybe I should have been there. I'm not a member of a committee, but said, hey, like, the town shouldn't even, and it kind of happens behind the scenes, in defense of the town, in defense of home rule, should not have even said anything to the state, maybe, and not said, oh, we're going to start horse trading possibly and see if the state's amenable. On its face, it was a ridiculous law, and I would think people who are in public positions, really your loyalty and duty should be to the town, nothing to do with the state, nothing to do with any so-called outside stakeholders who might have an interest in developing the town. When I hear the word stakeholder, I get nervous because there's a term called outside stakeholders, which could be people who don't live here, but they have designs on a town which may not be in the town people's interest. So when you say, well, we're doing this and this is state, I know you meant well, and that's what a lot of other towns are doing, but it looks almost like you, in some, not that you do, but agree with the state law, where the state law is very offensive because of the way it, you sure, yeah.
So I had somebody make a similar statement to me last week in a private conversation. What I tried to express to them, and I hope I do a little bit better job of it tonight, is as the town manager in the town, my principal responsibility always is to make sure the town, which is in this case, or in all cases, the corporate municipal entity known as the town of Hamilton. My job is always to make sure the town of Hamilton complies. We spend all day of our lives, myself and my department heads, that's almost all we do all the time. My finance director complies with our financial policies and best practices for accounting. My planning director complies with best practices and open meeting law, and we comply with procurement law. So whenever we get presented with a new law from the state, the modus operandi, the state of operation is always, how do we comply with this? And it's almost always, just do what they say. It's almost always, how can we make them happy and still protect what we have? And we always go to that. And so that's really where we're at right now. This whole process here is an exercise in trying to see if there's a way to comply. I don't know that there is or that there isn't, but I do know that the entire town of Hamilton should be involved in the conversation before a 5-member board or one town manager makes that decision.
Why aren't you coordinating with Wenham?
So,
Representing that
all right.
circle in its entirety.
They did bring that up at the meeting.
And they did bring
and I know that there's been some effort to try to coordinate. Their planning board has been trying to contact our planning board. I don't run the planning board. I don't know what.
That's what they said last week about
Me?
And,
So if they're trying to get in touch with me to get to the planning board, I think that's probably the broken process, because I don't usually run the planning board. Patrick is the staff to the planning board. When they need something, they come and ask me for money for consultants and things, but I don't manage the planning board's work.
That's why it seems so disingenuous when you show it as 72% of the circle and Wenham shows it as 33 or whatever it is, and it minimizes the impact. It's not the true impact. But we're together on everything else except for this thing. And when you show it that way, it looks like we're being guided into something that we don't want to be guided into.
I'm not trying to guide you into it. So it's. I will after tonight. I will now. I've been trying to focus on facilitating this meeting for the last 3.5 weeks. So now that this is off my plate, I have room to try and. So.
Just a basic question, and I apologize if it's already been addressed. How much are we talking about at risk if we don't comply with that? What is
So right now, the only thing that we know for sure that we benefit from is some housing money, some money to the Hamilton Housing Authority, and I think it's about $30,000 or $40,000. I don't. And so.
So we're spending all this time and resources worrying about $30,000.
Well, no, but it's also all the other stuff that gets taken away. So in
Is there a place to quantify?
in October, in October, the town, I'll give you an example. In October, the Hamilton Development Corp., with a little bit of assistance and support from the Select Board, or it might have been earlier than October, they applied to the state for a one-stop grant to be able to get $4 million to work on physical improvements to the downtown, along Bay Road, Railroad, Willow. They want to redo the sidewalks, crosswalks, sidewalk planting trees, just really beautify the place. And that grant, we didn't get it, but that grant we wouldn't even be able to apply for if we don't comply with this. So that's potential for $4 million of state money to fix our downtown, to fix Bay Road, but we can't even get in line for it if we don't pass this. And I'm not saying that that's a reason to pass it. I'm just saying that quantifies. It's one thing. There are a ton of grants. We have a lot of problem with water in this town. Even though we're not a coastal community, we have a lot of inundation flooding. We would not even be allowed to apply for MVP grants, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness grants. We wouldn't, if we wanted to fix flooding on Bay Road near the pond at the park, we wouldn't even be able to go to the state and say, hey, we have this problem, we need a bigger culvert. They wouldn't give us any money. They would say no to that. I'm just saying. So.
So does this mean that you're gonna push for compliance?
No, look, we're going to present something for you to vote on. I don't want the money. I don't think I said that at all. You asked me a question, so I answered the question, so now I'm in a gotcha moment? Come on, that's a little disingenuous. So it's 9:05, it's almost 9:10. I think I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I appreciate you all coming. If I keep you here till 11 o'clock, you won't ever come to another one of these, so I'm going to say the meeting's over now.